Hello everybody and welcome. I'm here with Damien Ivereigh, is that right?
That's right.
Fantastic. And Damien is an owner of Launtel, an ISP that provides NBN services, connectivity to all of Australia, would that be right?
No, just Tasmania and ACT.
Just Tasmania and ACT, fantastic. Yeah. So those guys are getting your good services. And if people haven't heard about me, I'm Techman Pat, and I do a bunch of videos on YouTube about tech. And
the company is actually called Launtel.
Launtel, is it?
Yeah, Launtel, yeah. As in Launceston Telecom, it originally came from.
Launceston, okay. All right. Well, let's start with that, Damien. What's your background? What exactly led you to starting Launtel, and what, I suppose, how the NBN is affecting your business right now?
Yeah, sure. So the business started, a little over 10 years ago, about almost 12 years ago now. When I moved from Sydney to Tasmania for personal reasons, and frankly I was left without a job, and decided that this telco industry, I'd been in the IT industry for many years, but not in telecommunications, and so I started getting involved with telecommunications initially as a telco in a box franchisee. And we were reselling essentially their services, which was going very well. But I was increasingly finding that we were creating our own services on top of what they were providing. Yeah. Then the NBN really started to happen in about 2013, thereabouts here. Like, it had been rolled out a little earlier than that, but frankly, it didn't really hit our radar. And we started getting involved with what was then the fibre to the premises rollout. There were a couple of little towns, Deloraine and St Helens in particular, where I really sort of cut my teeth on the whole way NBN worked. And look, in the early days, the fibre to the premises rollout was very disorganised. NBN were really struggling to get their processes organised. But we were able to do a lot of good work, if you like, because the other RSPs were even more disorganized.
Right.
Most of them had no idea what VoIP was, which is the technology that's used to put voice calls over the internet. Because one of the big differences with the NBN is that it is an internet-only service, whereas under the old ADSL days, you had a phone line, and that was the physical copper, and the ADSL went on the top of that. Whereas with NBN, it's sort of like it switched the other way, where you have an internet service and your voice service goes over that. Of course, nowadays people are less and less using fixed line phones anyway, so it's sort of the problem's going away. But in terms of how it affected us, look, it was, we loved it. I still do. And despite everything I criticize about the NBN, and particularly the later decisions that were made, I still think it's a fantastic project. I still think it was a great thing to do. It was late coming, but once it was they embarked on it, it's been a fantastic project.
Was there any concerns that you first had about the NBN before you sort of jumped straight into it? Like when you first heard about it, did you have any concerns?
Look, not really. With the original fibre to the premises, apart from process issues, how the hell do you get a piece of fibre optic into people's premises? Which was a big hassle, no question about it. And there were some people who were taking months and months to connect. But I remember saying to many people, despite all the hassle you're going through right now, in a year's time, you will have forgotten about all this, and you will just have a really fantastic, reliable service. And I say, this was on the fibre to the premises.
Yeah.
So, and that has proven to be true. I think that it's, as I say, so in terms of concerns, really just process ones, I think the technology was great.
Sure. And I suppose just like you mentioned on that fibre to the premises, what happened and how did your business change when fibre to the node was introduced, or basically that mixed technology approach?
Look, it caused us to reevaluate a lot of our assumptions about reliability.
Sure.
One of the great things about fibre is that it is a very, very solid, reliable product. It's also very easy to work with because, as I sort of said previously, the biggest cost is figuring out where faults are. And if you can quickly identify where the fault is, you get the right technician out to fix it, and it'll be fixed pretty quickly. When we had to change to the fibre to the node, we had to start thinking about, all right, well, how are we going to do testing on this? How are we going to work out where the faults are? And so the first thing we did is, until that point, we really had never bothered with 4G backups. We felt that the product itself was reliable, and there was really no necessity for a backup. With Fibre to the node, we now, for our business customers, and I should point out that Launtel was a business RSP until quite recently, about a year, 18 months ago. So we now strongly recommend that anybody that's on Fibre to the node gets a 4G backup. Just simply because the cost to a business of their internet connection going down is enormous. And it's much underappreciated. In a modern business, you cut the internet, and within an hour, they're sending their staff home. It is just like the power, and we would never put up with this level of reliability around power.
No, absolutely, I completely agree. It happened in our business. We were in the office, internet went down, didn't come back up for 45 minutes. We all went home to work.
That's right.
So, and that's a business fibre. That was, that was something that was fairly unprecedented at that time, which is obviously concerning in general. What have your customers been saying to you? What kind of feedback have they had back before the switch to the mixed technology versus what they are saying now? Because from my understanding, and I suppose looking at a layman's approach is, well, I bought internet from you, I expect this sort of level of service, and I also expect you to fix everything. What's the change between back then, the Old Testament, the New Testament type side?
Look, I don't think it's changed at all, because I think your prognosis is exactly correct, that people don't really want to know or care how their stuff's delivered to them, much the same way they don't care how, what the amperage limit is on their power supply coming in. It just works, You don't go to the tap and think, oh, if I run this tap, do I have to turn all the other taps off first and sort of get some water out of this one, And it's just extraordinary, the difference in the way we think about these things. So in a nutshell, absolutely, people look to us to provide a solid, reliable product. And this is one of the other disappointments with Fibre to the node, is that under the Fibre to the premises product, I knew I could put my hand on my heart and say, we will deliver your product, we'll stand by it, we know it'll work, and if it doesn't, we'll get it fixed really quickly. With Fibre to the node, we can't be that confident. We can't say to businesses, we totally and utterly stand by this product. We have to say, well, the product is this, you have to think about that, and maybe have a backup, and we'll do our best to work with NBN, and and we find ourselves getting into awkward situations where we're sort of almost when we're sort of having to jump on the side of the customer, fighting NBN. NBN will come back with some excuse about why this thing isn't working, and then we have to say, all right, we're going to have to go through this, and we have to explain to the customer, apologize for all the hassle and aggro, but this is what we have to go through, and it's very disappointing. It's very people don't want to know that much about the internet. They want to forget about it. In fact, I always love to say that we know we've done our job when you've forgotten we exist.
That's fair enough. There's obviously questions around where does your responsibility start and stop, and where does NBN's responsibility start and stop? What kind of tests do you do on a customer's line? Let's say it's Fibre to the node. And I'll ask about Fibre to the premises, but I'm sure there's a lot less there. What kind of tests do you do before you actually pass it on to NBN Co? Because I know for a fact a lot of people ask this a lot. It's like, when does the responsibility go from yourself to NBN Co?
It's a very good question, and in fact that is actually one of the issues with Fibre to the node, is it's not so well defined. It is actually, I will answer your question about Fibre to the premises, because then we can compare it. With Fibre to the premises, you have a box called an NTD, which has an Ethernet port. that Ethernet port, if you're getting a signal there effectively, then that's the end of the responsibility for NBN. Now, if you're on business service with us, we will take it further and we look after the devices on far end. If you're on a residential service, no, that's where our responsibility stops. Plug a laptop in there, you're getting internet, fine. Okay, in that case, it must be your router, it must be whatever, right? You compare that with fiber to the node. First of all, the device that is put on the end is not NBN's responsibility, yet you have no way of figuring out, is that the device that's at fault? So we see a lot of RSPs, for example, their first route is just to send out a new modem.
Right.
Which is ridiculous because not only does it take a lot of time, but there's also an extraordinary amount of waste.
Yes.
So then in terms of tests, there are a bunch of tests that we can do from the node, essentially sending signals down the line. You have to ask the client, could you just unplug your modem for a bit? We'll send some signals, on this sort of thing. They are pretty good, but they don't give, they can be confusing, and it takes some technical ability to read these. Okay. And the worst part about it is that sometimes we find issues on the line, go to NBN Co, and they go, well, yeah, but you're getting above the 25 megs or 12 megabits if you're on Coexistence. Right. We think that's okay. Probably the customer's modem. Oh, really? So it's this, and the other point, NBN, in theory, are responsible up to the first socket. Yes. In the house. However, that only works if you've got the lead-in cable, which is the cable coming in from the street, typically black, goes straight to a socket. A lot of houses aren't wired like that. They go to this point in the roof where it's then divided out into 3 or 4 sockets. And I can tell you from experience, NBN techs are very unwilling to climb in the roof. Yeah. Is it a tri-star or star connection? Yes, that's right. It's a star configuration. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. We've actually just got a tech on board whose sole job, and he's paid by us, to go and sort out these star wiring problems. Right. But it's the sort of thing that I believe NBN should be responsible for that. But in practice, it's it's very woolly about where they where their responsibility stops and starts. Yeah, I do. Obviously, I'm at home on this connection right now. It's fiber to the node, and I had a technician come out and add a single point in the house, in the roof actually, that I can just plug a modem in and run a cable anywhere in the house and put that modem there. And they removed that tri-star configuration, or the star configuration, because it was problematic. And initially, I actually, when they removed the cables from all the rooms, that doubled my speed instantly. Yeah. So it's quite incredible. So I guess in that sense, I was going to ask, what can you do at home? Obviously, apart from hiring a technician, is there anything that you can do at home to give yourself the best case scenario for speed and reliability? Are you talking about officially or unofficially? Let's say officially. Okay, so officially, no. The best you can do is make sure you have a short lead from your modem to the wall socket. But other than that, you're supposed to get a licensed cabler in to make modifications to your internal wiring. Sure. Now, having said that, it's not a hard job, and and frankly, it's relatively low voltages. You're not going to create a shock or anything like that. And I know a lot of people are willing to have a crack at it. Sure. And luckily, most of the time, all you're doing is disconnecting things. That's right. So you're not having to make sure you get the wires in the right place, all that sort of stuff. And the worst that can happen, frankly, is if you screw it up, you go and get a cabler in. Sure. The important thing to know is there are definitely a variation in the quality of cablers as well. Some of them understand this technology. One of the really useful bits of kit, but unfortunately they're about $5,000, is that you can plug into the line and you can actually see where all the faults are. And it'll tell you where all the dodgy joints are and that sort of stuff. I always think it's a good thing when you're looking to get a licensed cabler, ask them if they got one of these boxes. Do you know what it's called? There's one called OST. Oh gosh, no, I can't remember the model. I'll flick that to you. There are a couple of. I'll put it in the video on the side. It should pop up somewhere around here. Yeah, that's right. But essentially, it's a very important piece of diagnostic equipment. Sure.
Okay. And I did forget to ask this a little bit earlier. What's the most common problem that you actually find after doing your own diagnosis on a customer's line?
Look, in-house wiring is a very common issue.
Yep.
That's probably the most common. After that, it's typically lead-in cables have got corroded or shorting out. Or unfortunately, it could just be you're too far from the node. That's all you're going to get, you know. And and then you're arguing with NBN about whether the speed they're getting is sufficient, you know. There's some of it is that. Some years ago, they started using these things called gel joints, where they had a liquid that they put in. It was sort of like canola oil, I think, to try and keep the water out. Yep. Turns out this same substance then actually started to corrode the insulation. So, you know, it's just, you look at this stuff and you just go, you couldn't make this up.
Right.
And it's just, and so much of the copper cable in Australia is just in appalling condition.
That's unfortunate. Yeah, I've heard a few stories. Actually, a few of my audience have sent some stories that when they were actually cablers or installers, that they lived through and described exactly that situation where the gel they put in started absorbing water and corroding the cables, which is just incredible.
There's another technology they use, which is compressed air, where they use cables that have got paper insulation. Effectively, right. It's sort of paper insulation. Now, and then what you do is you keep the cable itself under high pressure, or relatively, you know, high positive pressure, which blows all the water out.
Right.
Well, that's great but I think recently they've been turning these pumps off. So all the water's been getting into the cables, and these, I think they're called, it's paper lined insulation or something. It's just, you know, it's really just collapsing.
Wow. And what can an ISP like yourself actually do about this? Is there anything you can do to help your customers get better stability and connections?
Okay, officially, I think no. The best advice is keep on at NBN.
Sure.
It's just when they have various levels of support, and the first line is very quick to reject tickets.
Oh, okay.
It's like it seems to be their job is to try and find a way of rejecting the ticket. Right. So we just get good at wording things in the right way and rejecting their quote resolutions and the like, and escalating things. But again, this is all time and costs and hassle, you know, and it's just a crazy we have to do this.
And what's the most asked questions from your customers around the connection, the NBN connection, stuff that you might, not necessarily about how they can get better speeds, but just questions in regards to, or why would this be happening? Whose fault is it? Do you get things like that?
Yes, we do, but we normally sort of preempt the question by sort of explaining what's going on before we start. So typically somebody will call up saying, hey, my internet's not working. So the first thing we'll do is go on to the NBN portal and see, okay, what's been their sync status for the last 24 hours. If that looks like it's been dropping out, then we'll start running tests and try and diagnose where the fault is. But at the end of the day, what we try and say to people is, look, we'll do whatever we can to get you back online. Sometimes it can be also, hey, that modem is, it's a bit old, or the other problem is the ISP provided modems, previous ISPs getting repurposed. They're often very poor quality. They were built to a price. You can just imagine Telstra or Optus going to a modem manufacturer and say, all right, whatever you do, it has to be built for X, you know? And so, of course, then, you know, they have to actually, you know, because they're giving the modem away. So they've got to keep them, you know? I
do actually have a question about modems that I will ask in a second. I was going to just also ask, is it all perfect on the fiber to the premises side? What kind of issues do you run into over there?
I wouldn't say perfect, but it is significantly better. The biggest thing, as I've said before, is the biggest issue, frankly, is red optical lights. Which basically means there's a rat's chewed through the fiber optic, or a backhaw's been through it. Or just people have been fiddling with the box and the fiber's fallen out. But those are really because they're quick to diagnose.
Yes.
Yep, light's gone red. It just literally might as well, it's just a call NBN light as far as I'm concerned. We have very occasionally had issues with poor performance due to packet loss. But literally in the thousands of connections we've done, I can only think of 2 where that's actually happened.
That's impressive.
And it's very rare.
Right, fantastic. And okay, so what would be your suggestion for a modem to somebody on a fiber to the premises, for example?
Fiber to the premises, we use Google Mesh Wi-Fi's a lot. We recommend those, particularly to non-technical people, because they're very easy to set up. You set it all up with an app. I've noticed there are actually some new models out, which I haven't had a chance to go and give a good test of, which look like they may well be better than the Google Wi-Fi. Oh, okay. But they're very fast. They do most of the latest standards. And yeah, they're just very easy to use and very easy to diagnose. And so, yeah, that's the ones we recommend for fiber. If you want more sophisticated stuff, gaming, sort of QoS and all that sort of stuff, then obviously there are routers out for that. If you're talking business, we use routers from a company called Microtik. Yes. Who produce it's a very technical router, and I would not advise it for people who don't know what they're doing. You wouldn't believe the configuration interface. Oh. But it will do almost anything you want to throw at it. Sure. Yeah.
And for those watching at home, QoS is quality of service, where you can control which device gets the amount of bandwidth that you allocate to it on your line. So you can make sure the kids only get a little bit, so you can have all the Netflix you can have. And what about fiber to the node? What sort of recommendations have you got around that?
Well, we take a rather interesting approach to that, because I remember I said earlier about how the great thing about fiber to the premises is you've got this Ethernet handoff. Yes. Is what we actually recommend people do is to recreate that. So we actually recommend 2 devices. We recommend a separate modem and a separate router. The modem we've been using and having great success with is a Netgear DM200. Yep. It's a very simple 1-port modem. It's not a good router, but it's a great modem. The first thing you do is turn all the router features off and put it into what they call bridge mode. Yes. And there's even a way of doing that so that it'll permanently be in there even after a factory reset. And then you plug a router in, and then you pick whatever router you like a Google Mesh Wi-Fi. Yeah. And it means that if there are any issues, we can just say to people, all right, unplug the router, plug your laptop straight into the DM200. Are you getting internet? Yep. Okay, fine. It must be the router. If you're not, then we start diagnosing onto the NBN again. Sure. We've often found that the modem router devices, and it's very unfortunate that most of us are very confused about the difference between a modem and a router and a modem router and all this sort of stuff. They often either have a good modem part or they have a good Wi-Fi part. I haven't found one that really, unless you want to spend a lot of money, that does both well. Right,
okay. I wanted to find out this, obviously, from someone like yourself. What is the deal with CVCs and the amount of bandwidth that an ISP buys out and provides speeds? When we hear about a speed saying that, your average evening speeds are going to be X, but you're buying this plan here. What's the deal with that? If you could give us the short and sweet, or at least something that we can...
I was going to say, how long have you got? All right. So I probably should explain what those things are. Sure. So NBN's pricing model, and you have to understand this is just a pricing model. It's just a way of collecting revenue from their asset, which of course being the NBN network. So they've divided the pricing into 2 halves. The first half is what they call the AVC, the Access Virtual Circuit, which is your connection in your house. So they charge a flat rate based on the peak speed, or notional peak speed, taking into account fiber the node. So that, for instance, you have originally they had a 12.1, 25.5, 50.20, 140, and on up to 50 and 500 gig on full fiber. Yeah. So that's one component. The second component is what they call a CVC, a connectivity virtual circuit. Now, this is the other end of the connection, which is the handoff point between the NBN and the RSP.
Yep.
So we pay per megabit for the amount of data that is well, actually we're delivering to the network, because most network is mostly stuff being delivered to you.
Sure.
So we buy more, the more CVC we buy, the more bandwidth we have to put onto the network to service all our customers.
Yes.
Now the problem was in the early days. And this CVC is actually quite expensive. When it first started out, I think it was around about $21 per megabit.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So, we're talking, and typically an RSP would need certainly half a gig, if not a full gig. That's $20,000 a month.
Yes.
Right. That's to giving to the NBN. So they have brought the price down a little since then. But the biggest issue was that, and this was the really big cause of the issues last year. No, not last year, the year before, 2017, when people were getting all these congestion. So because NBN gave RSPs the ability to buy whatever CVC they liked, and as little as they liked, because there was this constant price pressure, the RSPs were often going, well, that's an area we can save some money on. Yep, sure, the quality of the internet for people is going to go down, but hey, we don't care.
Yeah.
So they would, one of the ways they could sell a cheap service is not to buy a lot of CVC. And this was a cause of a lot of congestion. Excuse the dogs in the background.
That's all right. I've got one sleeping over there. It's no problem.
Oh, right. Okay. So yeah, in 2017, the performance, and this was across all the technologies, had nothing to do with fiber to the node, fiber to the premises, because this was purely a CVC problem.
Yep.
Was that it was very poor, and of course the RSPs were very happy to complain. Oh, well, it's the fiber to the node, and of course people believed them, and so there was this big. So NBN had this big hassle. The ACCC got involved, and they started this whole broadband monitoring project. So NBN came up with this new idea. There were some details in between, but I won't go into it. Sure. What they've done now is they've produced this new product called a bundle, where they sell you an AVC with a certain amount of CVC included. So for example, the AVC, the 5020 AVC comes with 2 megabits of CVC. Now what that means is that 2 megabits gets added up across all the AVCs you have. So if you have 500 AVCs, i.e. 500 connections, then you have a gigabit of CVC to spread between the users, right? Now, so it instantly fixed the problem, because suddenly now all the RSPs were buying enough CVC at the time. Yeah. However, they've absolutely kicked the can down the road, because that's all they're providing. Now, we know that Australia's internet requirements, their bandwidth is going up probably about 30 or 40% a year, according to the ABS stats. So 2 megabits, which was at the beginning of last year, was enough for then, but it probably should be 2.5 now. And it's not. And so the question is will the RSPs start buying extra CVC, what they call overage, which is, in other words, you've got the amount of CVC that comes with all those AVCs, but to provide a good service now, because people are using more, Netflix is going from standard definition to high definition, all the like, and will they start buying more? And this is a big open question. And I believe that we can expect to see congestion issues re-emerging this year.
This year, okay.
This year, yeah, I reckon. I think we've already started buying overage. Because we have a strong belief in providing enough bandwidth. Sure. It makes it hard for us to keep the cost down, and so generally we're more expensive than most. Sure. But this is the thing that I believe that some people, not everybody, but some people are willing to pay a premium for, to get a high quality of service. And the open question is whether the others will do the same. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. That's actually really informative. I think well beyond what we get from NBN Co's written documentation on their website.
Sure, yeah. The problem with a lot of these things is they're complicated, or they can be complicated, but they're not. It just takes a little bit of explanation. Just the terms are often so foreign, and it's very easy for people to switch off and just go, "Oh, it's all screwed," you know.
and so, what do you think? I guess, in your opinion, and obviously your great experience, does the future hold for NBN and generally everybody else that's kind of in this?
Are you talking about short term over the next couple of years, or over the next 20 years?
Let's say short term, and then we'll check into the long term.
All right. So over the short term, the best we can do is to shore up what we've got. There is going to be a program of fixing faults, and NBN will be replacing copper wire, through the street and stuff where they need to. People will get their in-house wiring fixed. NBN will also be looking at all those premises that are distant from the node and coming up with alternate solutions. They may put in a micro node, which is a cheaper node that they can put closer to you. They've even been talking about using fibre to the curb for these properties that are just way on the edge. They're sort of I've seen some that are 1.5 kilometres. And to put a node for probably 5 houses way down the end of the street is just not financially viable. So there was some talk. I don't know whether it's actually happened. I think they call it the long line FTTC or something like that. So we can see, and we certainly saw this in New Zealand when they roll out fibre to the node, that they will fill in all the holes, if you like. They will fix up the issues, and it will get better. Coexistence will end, and I'm happy to go through what coexistence means. And we will get better. But the question is, and this is always the problem that NBN is going to be up against, is our expectations are going up at the same time. Our requirements are going up, and so there's a constant race between NBN's ability to deliver a performing product and our requirement for that product.
And so, so that's I suppose the short term, and obviously the long term there, that it'll get better. So finally, before we finish, what is coexistence?
Okay, did you want me to go through the long term stuff? Because I didn't feel like I covered the long term.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
So in the long term, we've got to be thinking about where we go from here. Are we going to upgrade to start or restart the fibre to the premises rollout? Are we going to upgrade to another technology like FTTC? There are significant issues about FTTC changing from FTTN to FTTC. How are we going to pay for it? Is the government going to drop another $20–30 billion into this project? Are they going to give it as another loan? Will NBN ever have a product that they can actually put back onto the market as a saleable company? All that sort of stuff. The only thing I would say is that we will get fibre. There is just no question that in 20 years' time we won't all be on fibre. Because if we're not, let's turn the lights out and go home. Because this country will not be able to perform an economy without it. And this is the amazing thing, all these arguments about the technologies and stuff. And I go, guys, look at the long term. I've never heard anybody say, hey, this is internet thing. Yeah, we look like it's going to be tailing off soon, and we probably won't be using it so much next year. It's just crazy. I reckon investment in fibre is a bigger dead cert than investment in roads. Roads, we may not need as many roads in 20 years' time with self-driving cars and the like. There are clouds. I'm not saying it will happen, but investing in fibre is just a dead cert. So now you want me to talk about coexistence? Okay.
Well, look, let's have that as the last question. We've been going for 40 minutes, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but
I'm happy. You can edit it down and take out my ums and ers and things. So coexistence. So coexistence, which is another one of the issues with fibre to the node. So fibre to the node obviously uses copper, and this was rolled out alongside the existing services, namely N. Now, most people would not have heard of ISDN, but it's a business phone technology, very widely used in business, and never in the residential space. It is a digital copper technology, and it is interfered with by the fibre to the node signals.
Right.
So when they first turned on the fibre to the node, they recognized that if they run those things at full power, you've got an ADSL modem that's trying to talk to a device in the exchange many kilometers away, with a node that may only be 500 meters away, shouting in the copper line next door.
Yeah.
And you've got this problem called crosstalk, where signals go from one pair to another. So they recognized that FTTN would cause a lot of disruption. So they turned down the power, and they call this coexistence. So in other words, while there is both, because you've got this 18 months. Once NBN turn on an area, you've got 18 months to transition to NBN, and then your old services get cut off.
Sure.
So during that period, they turn the node down. Everything should mostly work side by side. There is some issues, right? So at the end of 18 months, and the other thing they did is they also said that during coexistence, we are only going to deliver the minimum expected speed is 12 megabits.
Right.
So if you're getting 14, 15 megabits, they're not going to come and fix your fault.
Happy days.
Yeah, exactly.
From their point of view.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So, and you got to remember the government mandated 25 megabits as the minimum. So NBN sort of squibbed it and said, right, well, it's going to be 12 megs until we turn off coexistence. So the thing was, we were expecting after 18 months, great, excellent, they'll start turning it up, all right? Well, it didn't. And it took us some time to figure out what had happened. We talked to NBN, and they were they weren't very open about this, but they did finally admit, no, we haven't turned off coexistence. The reason is because we have not managed to get all the businesses off ISDN.
Right.
So they've extended coexistence long past the disconnection date of the old services. So I'm not sure, but I have yet to find a node that has been taken out of coexistence.
Right. Okay.
I think there is another reason, and this is very unofficial, but I believe that NBN also realized that the moment they turned off coexistence, that suddenly they were going to get a flood of faults with people who can only getting 14 megabits. And so they didn't have the staff to deal with this. So they kind of thought, well, we'll just delay this a little longer.
Sure.
Now, to be fair to NBN, they have come out with a sort of testing program, which we're part of, where although they haven't turned off coexistence, we are now allowed to lodge faults for anything below 25 megs.
Yeah.
But I don't know how widely ISPs have signed up to that.
Oh, okay.
So yes, so that's coexistence, and it's classic politics. Telstra was the one who was pushing for ISDN services not to be forcibly turned off and to have a little bit more time and that sort of stuff, which was all about Telstra's bottom line. Because the moment a business is told your ISDN is going to get turned off, that's the moment they'll look around for another provider.
Yeah.
So if they can keep ISDN turned on another 6 months longer, that's another 6 months of revenue.
Absolutely. Wow. That is a whole new world that I had not even known about, the coexistence side of things, and I think I'll have to look into that a bit more. But Damien, thank you very much for that information. I think I had a bunch of questions here, and that you've pretty much answered all of them, which is absolutely fantastic. I think our audience.
If you have any others, by all means, I'm very open about the whole NBN and the ISP because I believe that a lot of the issues come down to people not understanding what's going on.
Fantastic. And what I'll do, I'll put a link to your YouTube channel that's starting to get off the ground there, and I'll link to obviously your company's site, so you guys can check out their plans and see if you're in the area to actually be able to choose them. Obviously you've heard from the CEO here, Damien, and yeah, if you guys like these videos, let us know in the comments below if there's any other questions you guys would like to check out or speak to Damien about. I'm sure we can organize that. And thank you again. So we'll catch you another one.
Great. You're very welcome, Pat.
Thanks very much,
See you later.
Damien.